All right, we are back at it on the SuccessFlow podcast. And while we were deliberating on this week's topic, which was a decision of its own, we went back and forth and came to a nice game plan of how we want to approach decision making, relaying some of the frameworks that we're using that we've heard work well, but we were a little bit unclear of, and just have a conversation talking through this, because at the end of the day, as we talk about on the SuccessFlow podcast, no journey's the same, and we are at the fundamental, at the bottom of it, the sum of our decisions, one after another, and looking at the second order consequences of those decisions, whether they're large or small, have the outcomes of the destination that we're trying to get to, or as you say all the time, the pivots that we make. Sometimes we can dwell on those decisions too long. And if you can have a go-to kind of process on how your brain has taken the data that you've compiled over the years and the most recent things that have happened in your life, if you can kind of work through that quickly, it can make your daily operating a little easier. So that's a topic for today, my man. What do you think?
Decision making. I mean, we make choices and decisions every day, all day. You know, half the time you don't even know that the opportunity is in front of you and you're making a decision on it. I mean, literally getting in the car, going to a place, saying yes to a meeting. Half the times we're on autopilot and making decisions constantly. And how did we get there? And usually it's because we saw some sort of success along the way. And so we continue to do those things. So I think it's a great topic. I mean, it's like, it's one of those things where you have huge decisions, life decisions. Who are you going to marry? Where are you going to live? You know, are you going to have a family or not? Are you going to get a dog? You know, are you like, what are the things that you're going to do in your life? But it's the tiny little decisions that I think you're getting at on how do you make sure you're making the right ones? And it's hard because sometimes you're making decisions where you have no idea what the outcome is. And sometimes you are making decisions where you do have a really good idea of what the outcome is. You know, and I think it all comes down to preparation and experience and skill set for the most part and what it is that you're trying to do. And if you're making a decision on saying yes to let's say you're a business owner and you want to grow your business and you say yes to a new potential partnership with a power partner, yes to a coffee meeting. And that's a decision. You either say yes or no. If someone asks, hey, you know, I've got some mutual or some clients that are in your space and I think they could benefit from your service. Do you want to grab coffee? And you literally could say yes, or you could say no. That's a decision. So how do you know if it's the right one to make at the time? And I think it just goes to, where are you at? Are you looking to grow? Are you looking to add more value? Are you looking for new power partners? Or are you at a point where you're hunkered down, building projects, pushing out new product, and you're not in a position where you want to grow right now? So maybe you say no to that because you're focused on something else. So it's just all about priorities and preparation and where you're at in your specific state of your business to say yes or no to that meeting. But sometimes people don't think about it in that depth and they just say yes because it's what they've always done. Or they say no because they're antisocial and they don't want to have a conversation with somebody, but they know they need to grow the business.
Which
so
is
it all
more
depends.
of an emotional programming there.
Totally.
You bring up a good point out the gate that we're already going off the notes for the day, but like how we base most decisions on what's worked in the past. Also, like sinking in what has not worked, right? That's the computer algorithm. We're talking about algorithms all the time now with AI and how this is happening faster and faster. Well, you've got the fastest one in between your brain. As you are aggregating all these inputs, you're building your own algorithm. And that's what we're trying to do with the subconscious mind, with the work that I'm doing, is make that algorithm yours, map it to your values, your purpose, the things that we talk about on this podcast. But you also brought to mind, did you ever read McConaughey's book, Green Lights?
No, that I've been hearing that one. I know I'm supposed to read it. I have not yet, but it's multiple times have I seen it come across to pick it up.
So now this is like the sign, because I wasn't prepared for this podcast, for me to go, and it's time for a reread. And I highly recommend the Audible because you got Matthew McConaughey talking
he's the
about
one.
Green Lights.
He's the one that's he's narrating it, right? Yeah,
he reads it, and you get a really cool glimpse into his humble upbringings, and it's just really, really well done. But the concept in a nutshell is, how do we put ourselves in situations for more green lights, acknowledging the red lights, knowing Like with the flow of traffic, timing wasn't right. Maybe the decisions weren't right leading up to that. And you get some yellow lights where you're kind of like, no movement really either way. But we know if you're not progressing, you're stagnating. There really is no yellow light, in my opinion. But a good way to think about it is like, where's life giving me green lights? And let's take that path more often than where we're getting reds left and right, because obviously something isn't working there. So you triggered that right out the gate there.
That's funny. I got to read that book. I always remember the line from him in Dazed and Confused. He's like, you know, what I love about high school girls is I keep getting older and they stay the same age. He's just such a good actor and a good human being from, Just Keep Living. Dude, he did this whole I don't know, virtual summit one day kind of conference thing. And it like broke the internet. I mean, it was like a huge deal. He's been getting into publicly mindfulness and green lights and sharing with the world like his perspectives, and he just seems like such a humble guy. So I'll have to, obviously a great actor, and obviously gonna have to pick that one up. So thanks for the nudge there, because I'm in between a couple of books. I've been started a few, and then a decision right now. Like, do I finish the book that I'm on, or do I pick up a new one? And sometimes that goes into the next shiny object syndrome, or whatever you want to call that. There's probably a name for it. But how often are we pivoting before we finish what we set out to do? And that happens a lot for me. Like there's times where I'm like,
me too, man.
You're on your way to halfway through something, and then all of a sudden the next thing that sparks energy and is exciting, you just stop that thing and move on to that. And you can get yourself into trouble there, and you kind of get lost sometimes. A little bit of chaos.
You can, and I do agree with you. There's sometimes where I can feel that. Am I going with the shiny object and just trying to move on? But there's also something to, I have books laying around everywhere, and there's something about just picking up a book or going to a page or jumping there when the hunger for that knowledge strikes. So that's a tough one. That's a great, whole different concept. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
No, I think you can. I did not think this was possible previously, but I definitely think you can, especially with Audible. You can jump from book to book or a new idea or whatever, because it's almost like listening to a podcast episode. Like you're not listening to one podcast all the way through until they, all their episodes air. Like you're listening. I know you listen to a lot of podcasts, like probably 3 or 4 at a time a week, right? And so like if you have 3 or 4 books going at the same time, that wasn't really possible. When you're reading, like holding a book and reading as easily as it is now with Audible, you can listen to a book and a chapter or two, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling called to go listen to this message or gain this knowledge, and then go listen to that one for the next week. And then the following week, you go back to the one that you were reading. And so I think in between making those decisions for sure, but I'm talking about like business decisions or ideas or, family, like what's the next exciting thing that's happening? And I think I haven't done this, but I think a lot of people get in trouble, especially if you're looking to get into entrepreneurship and you're not really sure what to do. You have to figure out what that thing is that you're really great at, the problem that you need to solve, and how you can make that a positive impact on the community that you serve, and focus just on that one thing. So many people want to create so many different things to drive revenue streams from here and revenue streams from here and revenue streams from here and revenue streams from here, when really if you just went all in on that one thing to build it to a level that supports your mission, and then pivot and add some creativity and do some other things at some point to add more revenue streams later. But you see so often, like especially on social media, I'm doing this with flipping real estate, and I'm making money by, doing a podcast, or I'm making money by, doing XYZ or whatever. And everyone's like, oh, I can do all of that. It's like, no, the decision you need to make is the one thing, go all in on that, build it so that way it can never crumble until the point where you're flying the 737, or I should say the 737 is flying and you're not even on it. And then you can go build or do something else and try out other things in investing or whatever. But the decision, I think, is you got to figure out what it is that you're really great at and say yes to that thing, because again, past experiences and successes will help guide you there. But if you're the shiny object syndrome, sometimes like I'm going to throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. I don't know how many ideas I had in my 20s and I never said yes or pursued them, but I brought them all up just to see if something would, and then I went all in on that one thing. And then as life goes on and you become successful, you start doing some other stuff.
Absolutely. It's so on time. As I was just having a conversation with Jeff Bajorek, friend of the pod, and we were just talking about the fundamentals, and I wasn't even thinking about that conversation when we prepped for this one, but it's the beauty of all the dots connecting. We were just talking about how it is not difficult to be excellent. And he actually used the term success by repeatedly doing the fundamentals really, really well, but how easy it is with all the information that is coming in at us to, I'll take on this side project, or I'll get into the minutia detail on how I could use a couple of these apps for better messaging or client acquisition. And it's just a constant discipline of what's the main thing, what are the main couple things, and on those couple things, what are the basics? What are the fundamentals? Which is kind of one of the things we wanted to talk about here on decision making in regard to recency bias. And sometimes we can use our frameworks or data input from a previous point in time that wasn't really relevant. Things may have changed. The game could have changed in the environment that you're in. And so that can give you less confidence in the data you're making the decision on, and why we can kind of stall or make decisions too slowly, quite honestly.
Well, yeah. I mean, you heard the phrase where money loves speed, especially as a business owner. Like you've got to go. Like you got to fail. You got to just go. I think you need a level of preparation in knowing that you expect to win, and that you have the confidence to go for it. That you need a level of preparation where it's clear in your mind, or getting your body right, or building your skill set. But once you have that preparation, that confidence to like, hey, I'm going to go, and if I fail at this, I know I'm just going to learn from it and pivot and continue down the path. But you have to make those decisions, those quick decisions, when it aligns. And so it takes a lot of prep work of like figuring out, well, what does it need to align to? Like, what am I trying to create here? And what does it have to map to? How do I connect? Okay, yeah, this decision here, totally. Like if this was successful and I did this, that would change my whole world. But if it doesn't, it's not going to crush my world. I'm just going to learn from that experience and continue getting better. But if I say yes to another option that doesn't align with that, well, now I'm just running around with my head cut off and spinning my wheels. And back to the basics, like you said, I remember when I was 13 years old, my first entrepreneurship business opportunity, let's say, was painting old gates for neighbors around the neighborhood. And it was
Tom Sawyer, baby.
Yeah. I mean, it was one summer, it was hot as hell. We're in Phoenix. We'd get up super early and we would go take these old wooden gates and we would paint them like redwood. We would take the bolts off and galvanize bolts that wouldn't rust, and we'd repaint the bars. We'd take the board. Like, we did a really good job. And we were 13 years old. It was me and a buddy and I, and we split our profits and we each made $600 that summer. And it was basically the things I learned was P&Ls. How do I take the expenses that I have? How do I set my pricing and set up my profits that way, and charge enough to be able to profit at the end? How do I sell? I got to find customers, and then I got to work hard, and I got to take care of my customer. Like, that's it. Like, at the end of the day, like, if you can understand the back end of accounting and understand what you're striving for, you can figure out the pricing, the market. If you know how to sell, right, you put in the work to develop relationships and sell to the customer, and then you work your ass off and take care of the customer at all costs. That's it. Those are the basics. Like, you will be successful. You just do it long enough and you'll end up being successful. And then you keep adapting along with the circumstances and the environment that you're in. And I just thought that was just a neat reflection point that I had, just not too long ago. A buddy of mine sent a picture of the old flyer. I'm not going to pull it up, but it was like a before and after of the gate. And I was like, man, like, at a young age, learning just the basics of building a business. And now how much that is instilled in the foundation of some of the decisions that I make today as an actual business owner and an entrepreneur, and like, bring it back to the basics. Like, we don't need to convolute it. We don't need to make it super complex. Like, take care of the customer, work hard, sell more business, and you'll be just fine.
Absolutely. And it's always back to that model. How am I bringing exquisite value to the market? How am I bringing exquisite value to the market? how is my interaction and my offering going to have a positive impact on this other individual, which is by definition a win-win scenario. There's an energy exchange via money, and there's an outcome exchange, whether it be time, efficiency, energy on the other end. And sure, sometimes it sounds like we're oversimplifying this, but you can plug in whatever you're doing on a day-to-day basis off of this and make your decisions accordingly. And it goes for your family, your friendships, all the above. And I'm glad that I'm actually glad the way this conversation has gone, just as a good reminder for me to keep going through that simplification process. Love it.
Yeah. And it's part of decision making in anything that you're doing is you have to have that reflection piece. You have to figure out where you've been in order to get to where you want to go and make the choice of, do I keep doing this the same way because it's working? Or do I do something different, not like in a drastic sense, but do I make the necessary pivots in order to achieve the success that I need? Because I've had the opportunity to reflect in the last year and some of these things didn't work. So I need to build in new SOPs, standard operating procedures, or I need to build in, I need to look for a different type of salesperson or a different type of partnership in order to drive more revenue to my business, to do the different things that I want to do and invest back in my team or invest back into the business in a marketing standpoint or whatever. But I think outside of business, I know it's been kind of entrepreneur heavy to start this off, just decision-making in life in general. Like, what are you saying no to in order to open up the time to focus on the things that really matter? Like my son, Jack, plays baseball every other weekend. They've got full-blown tournaments and I can't keep either kid off the court or the field. Some weekends we've got 6 or 7 games between the two of them. And I was invited to go to a Cardinals-Lions game at State Farm. Granted, I'm not a huge Cardinals or Lions fan. I'm a Vikings fan. I probably wouldn't have gone anyway, but I had a good, do you want to go to the game? There's a lot of family members going and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, I was like, no, I want to watch my son play baseball. It's an easy decision. Mm-hmm. And so you just set those non-negotiables, those core values that you have, the family first core value, whatever. And what's an unwavering commitment to yourself that no matter what, I'm going to make the decision. And that's when you have those hard lines of no, I'm going to every single one of my kids' sports games unless I absolutely can't. In that sense, it makes decision-making that much easier. So I don't even have to think about it. And then moving forward on the tougher decisions, I can, spend some time. I've got the bandwidth and some time that I can spend figuring out what I need to do in different areas of my life. But that's just one example of when you set your core values, especially your personal core values, and you set those non-negotiables, decision-making becomes a piece of cake because it's does it align? Yes. Does it not? No. Okay, I'm out. And then you go do what makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's leading kind of back to, we're talking about the core values and our massive transformative purpose as the North Star, but what we're really describing is first principles thinking. Been talked about on the pod before. Elon Musk has kind of made this vogue, as sexy as first principles thinking can be. But we're breaking down problems to their core elements and building your decision-making framework from the ground up. Also talking about reverse engineering, you have to get these things outside of your head, or if not, it's going to be an emotional jumble that you are really good at talking yourself out of. That's one thing that us humans are great at and make us different than the rest of the animal kingdom is we are problem-solving machines. They're if I do it this way, I could take an end-around way. Maybe it's a little more comfortable, or I could go this way. Getting it down on paper or on your computer screen in a flow chart. Everything we're talking about is very flow chart friendly or mind mapping because you can see it and tell yourself from a first principles basis, no, this is not the right decision to get me to B. That's an out, and this is Occam's razor, the most simple way to do it. The other thing we're talking about here is scenario planning. If plan A doesn't work, can you throw it this is a great example for football, the football fans that are listening, calling an audible or what you say, pivoting. Do we have an idea of what this scenario looks like? If it completely changes, what are the other 3 or 4 things that could happen in this scenario? And then how do I map back to my key outcome? And what am I going to do there? That scenario planning is also a helpful tool that I don't think we often do. We're kind of reactive as opposed to having 3 or 4 options to the obstacles that might be thrown our way.
Yeah, 100%. Like the pros and cons, you T-chart it. And you know who's really good at it? Kimberly, my wife, is really good at it. If there's a big decision, she'll sit down and like if we have to have a family conversation about something, like she'll T-chart it and like what are the pros, what are the cons? And we do this with the kids, and it's like, okay, well, I can see clearly that this doesn't make sense, or I'm willing to take the risk because the pros do outweigh the cons. But yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. It's something that flow charting or whatever, like you can do that in your head too. Like if you can get it on paper and you spend the time, especially with bigger decisions, do it. But if you can do it in your head and be like, okay, well, I think deadlines are a big thing. Like if I don't accomplish this by this, what's plan B? Because again, I think it's a matter of going all in. If you're making a decision on something, you're saying yes to an infinite amount of or saying no to an infinite amount of things. So go all in on that thing that you said yes to, and then give yourself a bit of a deadline. It doesn't have to be like tomorrow. It doesn't have to be this year. It could be 10 years. Like in 10 years, I think I'll be here. It's like your ultimate vision stuff. But if you give yourself a deadline, then you have the ability to see where you're at and have that a reflection period to continue. Like, yes, do I want to continue this? I'm on the right track. Or no, I didn't quite hit those numbers and I'm not even on track and I didn't put forth my max effort, but I think this might be a better way. So then you make those moves.
You actually just dropped a lot of gold there that we could break down there because
it's funny because it's funny. Like sometimes for these podcasts, like we prep and we have like bullets and then, you know, you're going to look and like read off a bullet or something. And then all of a sudden you go off on a tangent and you just like kind of black out and you just talk and it's like, and then it all comes out. I don't know how much gold there was, but,
we're not supposed to be telling the listeners that.
I know. But, you know, we're like, sometimes you go off the cuff and you just share stories. And that's what it's about. And that's why I love having these conversations, because sometimes, you know, especially like this one, we had the topic, we got some bullets, and then now we can share some stories about freaking gate painting when you're 13 years old or, and just it's fun. So making that decision Absolutely. To be okay with not being fully prepared might work out in your favor too.
100%. And one of the concepts that I brought that I thought we were going to be talking about most that we haven't even mentioned yet was scar tissue. And it's just this concept that's been coming up as a way to talk through why certain people are showing up a certain way. And it came up about a month and a half ago, was on site with the client, and it just came out after we were debriefing. I could tell that this CFO that we sat down with had scar tissue from a previous software deployment. And it just came out as we were debriefing. And I'm like, that can apply to a number of different things, but as scars are used metaphorically in music, it really made sense to me that these scar tissues, you have an incident or, you know, some trauma, whether it's physical trauma, when we're talking about a scar that is healed over, and yeah, it comes back tougher, but the skin's not the same. And I think when these happen in our careers, with our work as craftspeople, the scar tissue can really impact how we go through everything. It's part of that data that we've collected, right? So these traumas that heal over, but still have ongoing impacts in our business life and our family life and our work life. I think it's important to look back at why we have this scar tissue. Have we adjusted, or are we just keep doing the same things now that we have thicker skin? And I think that if we can leverage lessons from emotional baggage or things that didn't turn out the way we wanted to, maybe there's still an opportunity where you can run a similar play and it will work out totally different based on the new environment, new circumstances. Not necessarily every decision is going to come out this way.
Yeah, I think scar tissue, like you're battle tested. I think it gives you that opportunity to make decisions faster. And I think it gives you the opportunity to, you know, whatever happened in the past and whatever you got, if you got your teeth kicked in and something happened and your tougher skin, may not be the same, but you've been able to weather the storm. You're probably not going to, I don't know, you might make the same decision and do it all over again, just in a different way or a different perspective, or maybe with a little more finesse.
Yeah. I think a great example for this is relationships, right? People that may be single, you can run into individuals and become involved with or friendships for that sake. Oh, this is starting out very similarly. Things seem good. There are too many parallels to this previous relationship or previous friendship I've had. This is going to end up the same way. And I think it's all about challenging those assumptions, right?
Yeah.
This computer is working for us, but we need to say, wait a second, is this the exact same scenario? And what are the variables that could make this play out different?
Yeah, because you have this biased opinion of the other person when you've just met them based on a prior experience. And that prior experience never had anything to do with you. So you don't change anything about yourself, but you have this perception of someone else because it seems too eerily familiar. That's a really good example on the relationships. And it could be partnerships, friendships, as you said, or, if you're out there looking for a romantic relationship, like have you been burned by a crappy relationship in the past where it takes you a long time to heal and get to that point where you can have a new good one. And then it almost scares you in a way because it is following along the same lines. You don't want to get duped again. And that's hard. And it's hard to put trust in someone that you've just met. But I think if you just continue to focus on yourself and make yourself better and be more aware and just don't put pressure on it and just let things happen organically the way they're supposed to, I think then usually you end up in a happy place. But that's a really good example. I hadn't thought about that.
I love that. I think kind of putting a bow on this, it's use data, use the evidence you have from the past, but context matters. Like the new scenario, the variables, again, what's different in this time in our journey is really what matters, along with the context and data the data and historical evidence that we have. And I think the other thing is we can get into frameworks and first principles thinking, and it's logic, it's science. Love the neuroscience of all of this for decision makings, but also being in a relaxed state with flexibility and feeling into that, what you know is right, and you know the direction that you're going because you've done this work, is also super important. Making sure you're feeling into it. It's this combination of the brain and the heart, right? That's where the magic can happen. So we're not getting too rigid on frameworks and flow charts and T-charts, which are important, but it really is a left brain, right brain exercise.
Yeah. Well, you got to feel alive. You got to have emotion. You got to feel like energetic and ready to roll. And if you're coping with vices or things that are clouding your judgment or clouding your brain or deteriorating your body or whatever, like that's the first step, is cutting that stuff out and finding the clarity, so that way you have the ability to get energized and excited and focused on growth. And that helps you make those decisions. We know the old saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. And you have to be able to take risks in order to grow. You have to be uncomfortable in order to grow. And a lot of those are difficult decisions to make. And having the clarity in life and treating yourself well and giving yourself grace, I think is the first step.
I mean, we are dying either way, brother. We gotta call that, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
I think that's the pod. Thanks for listening. Subscribe. We have some cool guests coming in the next few weeks, and we're looking forward to keep bringing value. Let us know what you want to hear, and we'll be back at you next week.